Hello, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, college football fans across the nation and around the world. This is Tim May with the Tim May Podcast, with, of course, my good buddy, Awesome Ward. His parents know him as Austin. I know him as Awesome. Awesome, welcome once again to the Tim May Podcast.
Thank you, Tim. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's a pleasure to actually talk about a game that happened.
Yeah, it is. And it's also a pleasure to talk about the game, which might happen. It's very early in the week. We're recording this on a Monday at midday, and we have no idea what's coming down the road. Obviously, with Michigan having to skip its game last week because of COVID-19 concerns. And it's funny because there was a time way many months ago when you said if I never had to say COVID-19 again, I'd be happy, or coronavirus, and that's all we're talking about anymore. It has such an impact right now on the season. But then past that, as we tape this, the game has not been canceled yet, so we'll kind of preview that a little bit. But I think it behooves us also to look back to see how Ohio State handled its sudden outbreak on its team and got its act together enough in a week and a half's time to get back on the field without its head coach Ryan Day, without three other coaches, including Greg Madison, Matt Barnes, and quarterbacks coach Corey Dennis, and without 17 players. We don't know, as Ohio State is want to do. They won't give you specifics on whether players were missing because of COVID-19 or because they stubbed their toe. But we all know who.
Or disciplinary matters, and that's what you and I both talked about that last year. Like, it could make it unfair to somebody to be lumped all in that category. Now it's that they've chosen what they're going to do this year.
Yeah.
We'll deal with it, but it does. I wouldn't want to be, if I was just hurt with a sprained ankle, lumped in with that category, or that somebody might have thought I'd been suspended. I get it. They made their choice, but it is a little bit frustrating.
Yeah, but exactly. But when the interesting comment, we'll get to review of the game here in a minute. I've got my good friend John Bacon, who chronicles Michigan football like no other, and he's gonna come on. We're going to talk about a preview of the game as it's scheduled right now, and the impact it could have on Jim Harbaugh's career, also Michigan football for this season, and whether or not the Jim Harbaugh era at Michigan could be coming to an end. We'll touch on all those bases. But just real quick, going back to the game on Saturday, the interesting thing that was said after that game by Ryan Day was, he's supposed to be back on Monday of this week. I think his coaches are all supposed to be back Monday or Tuesday, possibly as late as Wednesday, depending on when they were tested positive for the COVID-19. But he also indicated he'd like to see, hopefully, some of the players get back. So it made you kind of like stop and wonder whether some of those guys were missing. Three starters on the offensive line, for example, a starting linebacker in Tuff Borland, and obviously Josh Proctor, big key part of the Ohio State defense. Whether some of those guys were missing because they had tested positive or because they were in the contact tracing situation where they had been exposed to someone who tested positive. So those answers will come about because we know the Big Ten has that 21-day quarantine, for want of another term, or 21-day must-sit-out clause in its COVID-19 battle. And right now, I don't have any fresh information on who may or may not be back among the players for this week.
Yeah, and that's, again, part of the difficulty in sorting through this is you could make an assumption that if a one position group had a bout of this, that it was either that it all went through that, or you held people out for contact tracing purposes. Again, the way that we have handled this is that until it's confirmed, there's really no point in that sort of speculation. But I can understand why that exists, and I think when you parse what Ryan Day said, it's two things: either that contact tracing was applying to several of those players, or he has some optimism that the Big Ten will adjust to the CDC requirements for quarantine and isolation, which is now down to 7 days for players with a positive test. I don't have any faith personally that the Big Ten will make the right decision because they've failed so repeatedly since August with the way that they've handled all of this. But if that were the case, you'd take the 7. You'd still have the 7-day reacclimatization period, whatever they call it, health screening and heart screening. That could be an amount of people that were part of the first wave that could potentially be back. Now, that would be asking a whole lot. But there are two paths there where some players could return.
Yeah, I would think if the Big Ten was going to relax that 21-day rule, they would have done so by now. I mean, you know what I mean?
The Big 12 did it the next day.
You're right. You're exactly right. You're right. Hey, this is definitely the year where you never say never, and never say never revisit, because revisit, that's the only thing that you can do anymore in this COVID-19 era is revisit online, because obviously you can't visit people who have it. That's a total different analogy I was going to go into there. My brain works in mysterious ways. It goes 12 different directions all at the same time, kind of hand grenade style. But let's get to my little interview with John Bacon here, and we'll come back and we'll just kind of chop up the impact of last week's game. Not the least of which, and I wrote about this for Lettermen Row, kind of, you don't want this milestone to be lost in the dust of a strange year of Larry Johnson as the acting head coach, becoming the first acting head coach or head coach in Ohio State football history to not only lead the team, have that honor bestowed on him, but also to get a win. And like I pointed out in the story, he could have actually been 2-0, if they'd gotten to go to Illinois way back when. But don't want to leave that milestone undiscussed, because it's quite an achievement, I think, in this strange year where racial unrest rose its ugly head very dramatically again in this country, and just the impact I think that has. And we all know Larry Johnson is one of the great coaches we've ever been around, right?
Absolutely. One of the all-time best to deal with from a media perspective, from the players that we've got to cover, who will all vouch for and fight and die for any time for Larry Johnson. Certainly the ones who worked with us with Lettermen Row. Like, I'll never, forget some of the stories that, Jalen Holmes and Sam Hubbard and these guys have talked about, from working with Larry Johnson. And it's any day around him, puts a smile on your face.
Yeah. Well, okay, let's get to my interview with John Bacon, man, one of my favorite people. And I'll say that about 3 times during the interview, because he and I, we've had a rapport since the first time we ever met, and he's just a great individual, a great author, right on down the line. Just put great in front of it. But I always appreciate it when a guy like of that magnitude comes on the Tim May podcast. And I've had a few of that magnitude, but he's definitely up there. We'll be back, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, to chop up what's coming for Ohio State. And as promised, ladies and gentlemen, what's that aroma you smelling here? That's John U. Bacon. John U. Bacon, welcome back to the Tim May podcast.
Always a pleasure, Mr. May.
I always like to throw that U in there, you know what I mean? Because I can't say M this week. I mean, actually, I can say M all I want, but it's always a pleasure having John Bacon on, ladies and gentlemen. One of the great historians in the Big Ten, much less of Michigan football, and that's his what do you want to call it, specialty. And once again, it's the game week. It's been a cross your fingers kind of situation for that, but and we'll see how it goes as the week progresses, right, John? But just what's your take, I mean, on the way Michigan has responded to this COVID-19 challenge?
Well, on the grand scale, they've done pretty well. They had some of the lowest rates in the fall, and they had them on almost complete lockdown. Discipline was quite good. But as the numbers spike around the state of Michigan, they've spiked in Ann Arbor as well, of course. And guess what? These guys interact with people coming back for Thanksgiving, and that's where Michigan is. I sincerely doubt, and Kirk Herbstreit walked it back, I realize, and fair enough. Michigan's got all kinds of problems this year. Name it: offense, defense, tackling, blocking. Tim, come to mind as things they don't do very well. I'd be shocked, however, without any real proof either way. I'd be shocked if in any way Jim Harbaugh is ducking a contest. That's not his style.
Absolutely. I agree with you on that. I mean, I agree. I mean, that never crossed my mind. But, the funny thing was when Kirk said that, he was kind of like channeling what other people were saying, those last couple of days leading up to that. And, how fans are, man. They like to get a snowball rolling downhill and then sit back and watch it run over people. But
also, that, Tim, you can think about it. Look, if Michigan's going to be a historic 30-point underdog, and Tim, I think that's the most ever, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, if 08 and 09 didn't do it, then what do you got? I mean, there's no way in hell the teams from Bo's era were ever 30-point underdogs. So very hard to imagine. when you are a 30-point underdog and it seems like your job may or may not be in the balance, the temptation, I'm sure, to sandbag this game would be overwhelming. And if you can poke the Buckeyes in the process and keep them out of the playoffs, that much sweeter in some ways. But again, just from my lifelong history with Harbaugh, not a style.
Yeah. Oh, exactly. I agree with that 100%. And you're right. I mean, the setup is, the setup is obvious to anybody from the standpoint of what this could mean to Michigan if, in fact, it could figure out a way to pull out a victory on Saturday. I mean, talk about great upsets. That would be it in the game, right? I mean, I don't even know where it would come. I mean, the Ohio State, the way it rallied for Earl Bruce back in 1987, but it wasn't this huge of an underdog. And obviously Earl Bruce had already been fired. There are all kinds of rumors going around, but I mean, yes, I mean, this would be the lone feather in the cap for the 2020 season, right?
And losing the game barely matters, frankly. I mean, they're expected to lose, obviously. But also keep in mind, too, man, it would be horrible for the Big Ten to not have Ohio State represent the Big Ten going forward. Indiana, Tom Allen, God bless him. He will probably be the coach of the year in the Big Ten, should be. Pat Fitzgerald at Northwestern, fantastic job there, too. But those programs are at least 2 notches below the Buckeyes. That's quite obvious. Ohio State, for the 20th straight year, is basically the Big Ten's only chance in taking on the Alabamas and the Clemsons.
Yeah. You're about as objective as it gets, but at your core, at your heart, there's an M on your there's an M tattooed on your heart, or at least a sack around your heart. How tough has this been to watch this year, John?
The hard part, I think, for Michigan fans, and I try to be as objective as I can be, is not just the losses. It's the dispiriting performance. Like, the players don't feel like they run out and touch the banner like they're in gym class. There's no passion there. Granted, there are not 100,000 people there either, of course. There are maybe 100. So that makes it a little bit harder. But other teams have the same thing. When they get outplayed, outworked, outcoached at home against Michigan State, that's a hard pill to swallow for Michigan fans. It's frankly, the apathy soaking in. That's been, I think, the hardest thing for Michigan fans to accept. They've had tough years before, a lot the last 20 years, but not like this. Yeah.
Does it all fall at the feet of Jim Harbaugh? I think most of it is. It's a 6th year at the helm. These are the players he's recruited. This is the coaching staff he's put together. This is the plan he's come up with. I mean, I guess the question is he at the end of the rope, or what's your take?
By the way, great questions. I'm finally writing about this. I've written this piece like 4 times over the last month, and I keep on revising it because circumstances on the ground, as they say in the military, are constantly changing. This has been the head-scratchingest of all seasons around here. It's 2016 when Jim throws a clipboard down at the horseshoe, and he gets a 15-yard penalty for it. After that, he told me he's got to lay off the referees. It's the Harbaugh rule, after all.
Yeah.
That gets your attention, got to. But the question is, has that lack of passion, spread to other parts of his job? Not clear. He's never had a job for 6 years before, coaching job. It's always been 3 or 4 years. San Diego 3, Stanford 4, the 49ers 4. Can he go the marathon? Not clear. What is Michigan going to do about it? That's not clear. I'm hearing, Jim might head to the NFL, and I'm hearing they're talking about an extension. So right now, no matter what the fans may want, it is. I've got a bunch of crappy partial answers for you, Tim. The whole thing's a head scratcher, and the hardest thing for Michigan to figure out is, what do you do next? His contract is up. If you're going to re-up him, it's got to be 3, 4, 5 years for recruiting to even work. Obviously, it's already suffering because of this. And then you got to get the assistant coaches for the same thing. So you got to put in a bunch of chips for 3 or 4 more years, $20 million a year, basically, for the staff and for Harbaugh for 3 or 4 years, or you got to pull the plug on the all-time Michigan man. Those are tough choices.
Yeah, those are tough choices, but it just shows you, just because you're a Michigan man doesn't mean you're the right man for the job. I mean, it really, it comes down to 0-5 against your rival. That's not the only way you judge it, but that is definitely, I think, I don't know, a barometer, right? A barometer of where you've gotten, right?
Well, ask John Cooper. John Cooper, I've always felt he gets a bad rap. I mean, he was a hell of a coach. He's a Hall of Fame coach. He should be. He had great teams, almost always top 5. And in fairness to him, he was going against Bo Schembechler, Lloyd Carr, and Gary Mueller. 2 of those guys are in the Hall of Fame. And if Mueller kept on coaching, he probably would be. He was not going against Pikers. He often was losing to Michigan teams that were basically asleep, who woke up on November 23rd.
Yeah, exactly.
And decided football. So Cooper gets a bad rap for that, but it's the Michigan game, man. And likewise for Harbaugh, it's not the only barometer, but what happens in Columbus happens in Ann Arbor. It is the game. And if he was 6-0 against Michigan State, which he is not, he's 3-3. That wouldn't save you. It's the Ohio State game, clearly. And they've been competitive in that game exactly once, really, and that's 2016. So that gets old for Ann Arborites. Part of that is not Jim's fault. I mean, Hoke and Rich Rod and Lloyd Carr preceded him, and among them, they have 2 wins in this century. And the century, Tim, as you know, is no longer young.
Yeah.
That's a horrible one. So it's not Jim's fault, but it's his problem. That you're 0-5, and now the patience is gone up here.
All right. Last question. What would it take? What does Michigan need to summon that it hasn't summoned consistently yet this season to get the job done in Columbus on Saturday?
They need to pull about 5 rabbits out of 5 hats. That's what they need to do. Because even if I were to tell you, if they were to fix their basic problems, which is blocking, tackling, play calling, fundamental defense, defensive.
The game of football. Yeah.
Football, in other words. Even if they're there to play their very best game, if Ohio State plays anything close to the best game, it still won't be close. The teams are just that far apart now. They weren't 2 or 3 years ago. I felt in 2018, if Michigan just played their game, for example, down to the horseshoe, that should be enough. And it wasn't. They didn't play their game. This time, it would take – look at 95 with the number 1 team coming in, of course, John Cooper's team. 87, as you mentioned, Earl Bruce. It's that times something. So this would go down. If Michigan somehow, A, were to play the game, we're not clear about that, and B, were to win it, it would have to be the greatest upset in the history of Michigan football.
Yeah. Wow. The game, man. It never fails to intrigue you one way or the other is the way I look at it. And John Bacon, noted author, noted man about town, et cetera. I appreciate you joining the Tim May podcast again, my man.
Tim, it's always a pleasure despite your efforts.
Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be back in a moment. That's John Bacon. Always appreciate having a little bacon with my eggs in the morning. How about you? Awesome?
You can't have any breakfast without some bacon.
There you go. Or at least the aroma of bacon cooking in the back, and then you order your oatmeal, right? But I digress.
Doesn't look like I've been eating a lot of oatmeal recently, I'm afraid.
Hey, keep this to a 15-second soundbite. Your opinion, will Jim Harbaugh be the head coach at Michigan in 2021?
No.
Well, that was 15 milliseconds. Appreciate it.
I don't understand how they could continue to employ him if they have any designs of being competitive in the national landscape or winning a Big Ten title again. They've reached their peak with him, and clearly the players are not – they're tuning him out. They're not fighting for him. The energy that they've played with has been absolutely pathetic in most of these games this year. And that tells you where their mindset is, and that's happened everywhere he's been. You look at the end of the 49ers tenure. This is the way that everyone could have predicted it was going to end for him.
I see what you did there. You gave me that terse, succinct answer, and then you went off.
Then I got
now. But you've taken me, man. You've taken me with you, because isn't it amazing with Urban Meyer reportedly turning down or just saying I'm no longer interested in the Texas job, how Texas is now going, well, okay, well, maybe we'll just stick with Tom Herman, $25 million or whatever it was going to take to get that buyout. They were willing to do it for if they could get Urban Meyer, but to get Matt Campbell or James Franklin was even has been in the discussion, and several other guys, maybe it's not worth it. They wait a year.
Yeah.
But we're talking about 2 of the blue blood programs, in the country, or at least used to be, they're kind of at the same juncture, aren't they? In some respect.
And really,
Wait a minute, with coaches that maybe they don't want anymore that they thought were going to be their savior.
yeah. And this is it's a bizarre situation for them, and it's even more uncomfortable for them because Texas was clearly desperate. I was told they were willing to go all the way up to $12 million a year to get Urban out of retirement. And
Yes.
you even see like Michigan message boards and Twitter, replies about them wanting Urban to switch sides in the rivalry, which is never going to happen because then they'd have to rename the restaurant where we do weekend kickoff on Thursday.
No. They would have to literally tear it down, but go ahead.
You and I know him quite well from our time over the last decade or so.
Yeah.
I never bought into the Texas situation. Obviously, Michigan is a completely different matter. He's never going to coach there. But he is so content with his lifestyle right now. And I know that this was about Michigan and Texas, but I never bought it in the first place that Urban is going to come save any of these other blue bloods. That time is over. So I don't know. Like, Texas has it really easy. Matt Campbell just beat Tom Herman a couple weeks ago. He's built he knows how to recruit in the Big 12. He knows how to win in the Big 12 without the resources of a Texas. For them, it's easy. If you're done with Tom Herman, make the move. And spoiler alert, Matt Campbell could do the exact same thing at Michigan with his own familiarity with that region. If you want to make the move, you don't have to be content with what Jim Harbaugh and Tom Herman have done. For Michigan, I think it's clear that parting the ways is best. For Texas, I think there may be some element where, they've gone too far down the road publicly to really salvage that relationship, but they had no need to because Tom Herman has not, gotten all the way back to that national level that they talk about, but he's rebuilt that program into a respectable team that could still have some momentum. That they undermined themselves in September when they talked about firing him, and that's why Quinn Ewers is now an Ohio State commit. They did that to themselves, and I think that's why they'll have a hard time attracting any top-flight coach because that administration has proven to be an absolute mess.
Yeah, if they leave it up to winter else next year, they have really killed themselves recruiting. I mean, they have killed themselves. We all know that. Number two, I think Urban entertained, where they got to a formal offer. That's a plausible deniability type former offer might have been what we heard about. But I really think some of it was, Urban did not appreciate. I think maybe the background that was involved in the whole Brett McMurphy, Zach Smith situation that a lot of people think that Tom Herman and possibly his wife may have instigated or been part of. And I think Urban, you and I, our feelings for Urban Meyer are well known. I really like the guy for all kinds of reasons, but I wouldn't put it past him for at least entertaining it just for Tom Herman to have a little twisting in the wind kind of moment. And whether that was part of it, who knows? But it was really ironic to me that the guy who helped elevate Tom Herman to the situation he was in, now they were talking about trying to get that guy to replace Tom Herman. The irony of that is lost on no one, right?
Well, I mean, look at all the other hires that Texas has made that have come from the Ohio State program. Like, they did everything except get the guy to, come fully install his program there. And here's the other part of this is even from the Texas side, which you said we know Urban so well. He's not 2012 Urban Meyer anymore, and so that made it even weirder to me. This started in late September. If we're going to be totally honest, the first time that conversation was happening. And certainly he was open to that conversation at that point because of the amount of money that was involved and Texas's reputation. You don't just say no to the meeting, but, whether that's flying out to big games, enjoying being on television, taking a vacation to Napa whenever you want in the middle of the season, going to your house in Florida, spending time with grandkids when that's possible. I mean, he's got a great gig right now. And he's not motivated by all the same things that he was in 2004, 2012, 2016. He changed. So that that part of it just never really added up to me. he's happy. Like that's it.
Absolutely. But like you just said, somebody comes knocking at your door. I've got a bag of money here. It's got $10 million minimum in it. You interested? Homina, 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 homina. It's like Bobby Rahal, good friend of mine now. One time I told him somebody knocked at my door and one time and said, he's interested in buying our property. We got 4.5 acres, in the middle. It was just and I told him about it, and I said, my wife and I said, no. And he goes, well, you got to at least listen to the offer. You know what I mean? You may be able to buy a bigger and better place somewhere else. Of course, that's not usually the way those kind of things work. But You're exactly right. I mean, I think he's very content with what he's doing right now. By content, I mean, this, man, putting on that show, the kickoff, the weekend kickoff show there at the Urban Myers Pint House in the 7-0 room. That means a lot to him. Yeah. And not only that, he wanted it to be done with quality, just like the 2012 flashback show we did. He was very much involved in making sure it wasn't just, slap around kind of situation, that it was real and had some quality to it. And so he approaches anything like that. We all know him to be a quite serious individual.
He's he's probably the most intense person that I've ever met in my life. And that was even just on the outside. Like he's shifted all of that now to being very good at television, and he is awesome at it, to taking on, this opportunity and working with us when the situation allows at Lettermen Row. He is extremely hands-on. His golf game has gotten much better. He's taken up tennis and gotten pretty good at that as well, from my understanding. I haven't played against him there. I'd like to get out with him at Muirfield when they reopen the course and test myself with him there. But, I mean, he's got everything that he wants. And the reason that, certainly, as you said, if a bag of money is sitting there, you ask what you need to get it. But I think that the return for him, like he has more money than he could ever spend. Like that's different than offering that to Billy Napier or, maybe even not Matt Campbell, but anybody else on the rise in that profession. Urban has made his money, and he's got his 3 title rings, and he's got a legacy now to think about at Ohio State. And if he had gone to Texas, the first thing he would have to do is recruit Quinn Ewers and try and snatch him back away from Ohio State. Like, you instantly turn heel on the place where you have solidified your legacy. And he's aware of all those things. He used to downplay legacy, where he fit in the national landscape, for a long time. But he's now at it. When you're 45, maybe that's easier to do. When you're 58, that's much harder. And all those things played into it. And I kind of was amused watching it all play out from, some distance, because it just didn't. None of the pieces fit together.
Yeah, I was on an Austin American Statesman podcast last week talking about it, and they asked me about gut feel. I said my gut feel is that Tom Herman will still be the coach at Texas in 2021, and Urban Meyer won't be, just because of everything you just said there. And by the way, I want to, in truth in advertising, he's 56, not 58. The reason I know that is because he's 10 years younger than me. Gotcha. He's the first head coach I ever covered at Ohio State that was younger than me. So there you go. And of course, Ryan Day has kept up that trend. Although Larry Johnson, he went the other way for me. So for a minute there, I felt like a youngster all over again. And so did Larry Johnson. Real quick, let's touch on a couple things. Okay. I don't know how much we got to preview the game. Whether it happens or not, we still don't know as we video this. But Ohio State's a 30-point favorite. That's apropos based on this season. And even though it's maybe the largest in the history of the game for a favorite, it's not a surprise. I'm a little surprised it might not be higher.
It was still shocking to me to see it on Sunday, Tim. I mean, you think of all the times that people have talked about this rivalry, and you throw the records out and those old cliches that you're going to get the best battle, the best effort. That hasn't seemed to really matter the last couple of years. And Ryan Day has had he had no problem last year running up the score as much as he possibly could. He would certainly, I think, do that again on Saturday if he gets the opportunity. And the gap, whatever Jim Harbaugh was trying to avoid in that conversation last year about the gap between these two programs, it's crystal clear when you watch them play. There's simply no comparison between those rosters and the buy-in from the players and the culture and all those. It's just, I know a lot of those things are hard to actually define or quantify, but Vegas did it, I think, pretty succinctly. They're at least 30 points better than Michigan on Saturday. I I am pretty sure I'd have to go back. Maryland is much more likely to give Ohio State a game. If that's the situation that comes on Saturday, that might be more useful for Ohio State in that college football playoff argument.
I agree. And by the way, if you want to know in a nutshell what's wrong with Michigan on the field, just get the videos of the Michigan State game when Michigan State beat them and the video of the Indiana game when Indiana game beat them. Just play those real rapid fire through and just watch the difference between those two teams. And not only those two teams, but it looks like even the approach, the attitude, whatever you want to call it, they're like I was talking with John Bacon. I said, you can't spell malaise without the M, and I thought that was a good comment. But the point is,
malaise blue.
Yeah, there is something. Yeah, the malaise in blue. There you go. Hey, I like, man, the malaise in blues. Man, we got to go in here. Awesome. We're going to just end on that. But just real quick, before we go, a comment on this. Justin Fields was the Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week.
Mm-hmm.
My opinion, obviously Drew Christman was the I don't know who the other co-special teams player was, but oh my goodness, did he flip the field like he did 2 years ago at Michigan State? Yeah. Those ought to be his 2 videos for the NFL scouts when they come calling, because oh my goodness. But back to Justin Fields in a heartbeat. Wasn't his greatest day of total offense, but over 303 yards of total offense in 35, 36-degree weather. Past that, the leadership he showed, the guts he showed in terms of just, you know what, I'm running the ball today, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to win this game. We've got we got three starters missing on the offensive line because of COVID-19. We're missing our leader on defense, Tuff Borland, and we said Josh Proctor and some other key guys. I'm going to play shortstop as a quarterback the first half while Harry Miller figures out where I'm standing, with his snaps. And Harry Miller did an admirable job.
Yeah.
He would like to have about 12 snaps back, I think. But the point is just the way Justin Fields, just no doubt about it, was going to win. Ohio State was going to win that game on Saturday, spoke volumes. Agreed?
Yeah, and I think your point that you said this, you thought that was probably the best in his career. It's to me, it's
I'm just talking about the leadership.
Yeah, no, yeah, absolutely. I was trying to. To me, it's a debate between the way he played in Ann Arbor last year when he was clearly hurt, because the throw that I will never ever forget, no matter what happens for the next potentially 4 games in his career at Ohio State, the coming off the bench, the throw, the Garrett Wilson touchdown to really put that game away is the one that I know I will never forget him doing. And it's kind of weird that a lot of plays in that Michigan State game will stand in my mind too. Sticking a foot out to stop one snap and running around and then still getting a first down. He did things on Saturday that I believe strongly only he can do. And he needed to run. He needed to, flash those shortstop skills and really bail Ohio State out when it was all on his athleticism. So it's the 2 sort of adverse situations. The knee injury a year ago, and that I know that game will stand out forever. And then this one, which was just because a little bit of a recency bias, but the deck was so stacked against it, it'll be hard to forget all the things that he gave Ohio State in that game when things could have easily gone wrong. Even when some snaps were good, they were a little off kilter with blocking schemes or the zone read. He couldn't get the handoff right, and then he would just run for 25 yards. It was remarkable what he did.
Yeah, and it was basically whatever it took was the motto. And speaking of that, before we go, Larry Johnson, one of our favorite people, like I said, to deal with and stuff.
Yeah.
And even it wasn't lost on Gene Smith, obviously, the first African-American athletic director of Ohio State, and he's in charge when the first African-American acting head coach gets a win at Ohio State. It was a milestone moment, right, for the program and maybe for the school in particular.
Yeah, without question. And, another tribute to the next man up mantra that the coaching staff had to do that. And it wasn't something that he could do by himself, because taking out, those coaches that they did with Greg Madison not available, Matt Barnes, Corey Dennis. I mean, think about that for Justin Fields. It's also to your previous point to him that you did not have Ryan Day and Corey Dennis working with the quarterback. Kevin Wilson, we know what he can do as an offensive play caller, but that was out of kilter. You had, Keenan Bailey, who's, I don't know why he's not a full-time coach yet somewhere, but it's to Ohio State's benefit because he's one of the best quality control coaches that you're ever going to find, a future star in this profession. Like Justin Fields had to take on a lot of leadership, in some ways a little bit of coaching with a lot of young guys. But that's, I thought the most fitting part to your actual question about Larry Johnson was that those defensive linemen and Haskell Garrett made such an important play in the win. It was fitting because it was some of the
textbook.
Some of the lessons that I've learned. You know, I've had a couple opportunities to sit and watch film with Larry Johnson and Chase Young, or Larry Johnson and Nick Bosa. And it's basically 5 things, those 4 tools for rushing the passer and then matching the hand. It sounds so simple, but that produced a touchdown and a defensive lineman getting an interception on a basic technique that Larry Johnson has taught for his entire career. You know, to make a little bit of history that way, it was so fitting. Like that's why Ryan Day is sitting there saying he had a tear in his eye. I mean, that's what Ohio State is all about. That's what Larry Johnson's all about. That was truly a special moment.
Yeah, Ohio State football under Urban Meyer, and it was this way under Jim Tressel too. But I'm talking about especially the Urban Meyer and now Ryan Day episode or era is thoroughness and toughness and togetherness. I mean, that's kind of, that's not their mantra. That's what I'm just observing. And boy, was it ever on display at East Lansing in a game that could, they were coming up, Michigan State was coming off a big, huge upset of Northwestern. You can laugh at that. Northwestern's the representative from the West that Ohio State hopes to play in 2 weeks in Indianapolis for the championship. But the thoroughness, the toughness, and the togetherness that program showed, talking about Ohio State, will never be lost on me, man. It's one of the great moments that I've covered. And then, in Ohio State history. And I was just, you guys were up there, and you're about as close to the action as I was. I was sitting at home watching on television. You know what I'm saying? But just knowing all the ingredients, all the components of that, and to see it come together, it should touch you if you're an Ohio State football fan. But with that said, I know you've got to get going awesome. And, I want folks
we're going to have to be back for another podcast later this week.
I was going to say, I want people to understand that if things change about the game, if there's not the game, the first time since 1918, and they played, that was the first time the big run started. It was 1918, which, by the way, started with a pandemic going on, the Spanish flu. It'd be interesting if this run ended during a pandemic, but we'll see if that happens. But I want to promise you folks, if in fact that does happen, Awesome and I will be back with another podcast, because I don't want to just leave that sitting there like stale bread all week. And a lot of you folks will get a BOGO, buy one, get one in this one. But until next time, and possibly until later this week, this is Tim May for Awesome Ward. We'll see you then.